Hey there, so there seems to be quite a lot of interest in budget guitars and basically trying to keep costs down. So it's now April 2023, interest rates have been rising, it's getting harder to borrow money, times are starting to get a little tight, and so I thought I'd focus on if you need something to play and you don't have a lot of money to throw around, what ways are there of getting something like a decent guitar? So that takes us to some decent budget guitar manufacturers. It also takes us to the used market. There's a lot of places you can go and get a very good used guitar. So there's obviously, online ads, there's Facebook ads, there's Kijiji, there's all the regular online stuff. There's also some good deals to be had in some actual old school retail outlets. So two places that I'm thinking of, one is your kind of general guitar store, but you're not looking for the high street ones where they're spending a lot on real estate. You need the low-key, quieter, more out-of-the-way places, probably doing some online business as well, but they've usually got inventory and they'll do trades and stuff like that. So if you live near a decent sized town, you can usually find somewhere like that, but they're good to keep a check on. The other kind of place you can go is the second-hand store. Call them what you will, pawn shops, second-hand goods stores. There's kind of different places like this. I've lived on two continents and you'll always find somewhere selling used stuff. And one of the things that most of them seem to sell is musical instruments. Years and years ago, before everything was online, you could sometimes get good deals because people honestly sometimes didn't know what they had. Now, a very quick internet inquiry will give you a pretty good price for pretty much anything. So it's not like you can go in and go, hey, there's a Fender, I'm going to pay $300 for it. That's not going to happen. But sometimes you can get some pretty good deals just by being in the right place at the right time. So it needs some patience. You're not going to sort of be able to guarantee what you get, but sometimes just keeping your eyes open, you can fall upon some pretty interesting things. So most of the stuff I look at and do, and most of the things I'm interested in, are kind of more metal biased, but I grew up listening to a whole load of stuff, including some I guess rhythm and blues and more kind of classic rock type stuff. I'm thinking of bands like Status Quo from the UK. At one time, Status Quo are my idols. They basically, the guitar they used was the Fender Telecaster. So that's one thing that probably is less good for metal, but certainly if you're into some classic rock, certainly blues, I hate to say, but even country, it's still a perfectly good guitar. The other things, even in the metal scene, that you're going to need at some point is an acoustic guitar. So, almost everybody does some kind of, let's say, an acoustic set. There's usually, a quiet number, or sometimes it's to give the rest of the band a rest, and somebody does something on acoustic. Some of that stuff can be pretty atmospheric and some of them is pretty classical. So at some point you might need an acoustic. Which brings me to this. So this was actually something that I pretty much ended up getting for my wife. She was with me and we got this from a actual guitar store. It's one we go to quite often. The guy does trades. There's a lot of online business he does, but he has a physical store. You can go into it. There's stuff all over the walls. The stuff stacked up at the back. The place is not tidy and it's not it doesn't look like an Apple store. But he has some interesting stuff. There's new things that come in. And he's got everything from, entry-level guitars, like the amp and guitar in a box, up to, $10,000 guitars, You know, one where, you know, like a Steve Vai special where actually there is some Steve Vai blood in the paint finish. So those things, they fetch thousands and thousands. But you can have a look round. We were in there one day, my wife was looking for something, and she saw this, sitting quietly in a corner, unloved, no attention. It's a Takamine G series, and it actually looks really nice. It actually plays really nicely as well. I mean, it sounds beautiful. If you hold your pick right. And the nice thing is, it's actually in tune and stays all the way up the fretboard. So many cheap guitars, you know, you get sort of further up the fretboard, they're, you know, going out because the thing's not that accurate. This is absolutely bang on. Doesn't clearly state where it was made, but I suspect China. But that actually is not a problem with the thing. Even, you know, the finish at the back, actually really quite beautifully made. Very nice finish. No fret sprout here at all. The fretboard is smooth. Low action for, you know, a relatively inexpensive acoustic guitar. It's quite nice. So we see it in the store there, and my wife's going, oh, that's nice. How much is that? Guy looks at us and goes, $200. It had been there for over a year, and this is kind of one of the key things. You have to be in the right place at the right time. So this had been sitting in his store. It was very, very dusty when we got it, and he goes, well, you do know it's a second. So we go, okay, what's the problem? So we took it down, and we could not really see what the problem was. There is a tiny blemish, and I have to go and look for it now. I'll try and bring it near the camera. But right down here on the finish, you may be able to see just along here a slight blemish in the binding. So it's not perfect, but I'm guessing until I mentioned it, nobody was really going, oh, I can see a blemish on the edge of that guitar. So there's one avenue if you're looking for a really good quality, and the Takamines are nice. These things, I think, retail normally in the kind of 450, 500 Canadian dollar price range. So again, buying it from an actual guitar store, new, but just being in the right place at the right time, you can get a decent guitar for $200. So I think that's one way you can look at stretching your budget these days. So here's another nice used guitar at an interesting price. I know most of what I do is metal, and I know you can't really play metal on a Telecaster, but sometimes if you want to play a little bit of classic rock, it's nice to have that single pickup sound, and this is actually able to do it. I can remember spending ages trying to play something that was originally written for and played on a Stratocaster, and I didn't have anything with single pickups at the time. Just couldn't get anything to sound even vaguely right. So occasionally you might want that sound. So there's a lot of things like this on the market. You can buy the Squire and New things. You can buy quite a lot of copies of this kind of instrument. And there's, I think, a lot of snobbery around Fender and Gibson and some of the other well-known names. I prefer playing mostly the sort of Asian guitars, so, you know, Jackson, Schecter, Ibanez. I find are really nice. But sometimes it's actually nice to look at the Gibsons and the Fenders and just see what you can do with them. So here's another interesting budget find. So this one actually came from a second-hand store. I wasn't particularly looking for it, and this is the other thing, you have to keep an eye out for things, and sometimes you have to be patient and you have to be ready. I'd bought a few things every now and then off this guy, traded stuff, sold some stuff, and so I kind of was a little bit of a regular customer. But I go in one day and I'm looking at a couple of other things, and this was sitting in a corner behind a bunch of stuff, and it kind of looked a mess. It wasn't really being presented for sale, so you could tell the guy didn't really think a lot of it. When it was in the store, it had this pick guard on it, and some people may like it. I basically think this looks shit. So I'm kind of looking at the guitar. It was also filthy dirty, but I'm looking at the guitar and I'm kind of going, it's fundamentally sound. There's no real damage. The frets weren't showing any huge wear. It was just dirty, dusty, a lot of grime on it. But you know, even if you scrape the grime off the bridge pieces and stuff like that, it's like, yeah, underneath it's actually still a nice guitar. The strings were in terrible. In fact, I think it might have even been missing a string. But you know, you could tell nobody cared about it. And the guy had probably not paid a lot for it. So I'm looking there and I kind of ask him, hey, you know, can I take a look? So I look at it. I'm interested. And it's like, okay, what would you let it go for? Looks at me and he says $450. So I'm like, okay, 450. It's a made in Mexico Telecaster. It is actually a Fender. It's a Telecaster. I don't know whether you can see in there, but you know, very clearly it's a made in Mexico one. So a lot of people may go, it's not a real, you know, Fender. But honestly, I can't tell the difference between the American made ones and the Mexican made ones. I'm hearing tales now that, you know, even some of the higher end ones, a lot of the parts are brought in from somewhere else. It may only be final assembly, and even some of that is questionable. So, you know, where is a guitar built? Well, you know, the parts come from everywhere. So I took the thing away. The first thing was, I think Amazon.com have parts for Fender. It got an original Fender pickguard on, the original white. I think the colour is something like Tahiti blue. And I cleaned it up, I put new strings on, I swapped this, cleaned some of the electrics, used some electrical switch cleaner, literally just tidied up the fretboard. The frets, the fretboard is as straight as anything. The action's actually really low. I think I might have had to do a tiny little bit of adjustment there. But overall, it's in actual beautiful condition. It really is a nice colour. It plays well, so no issues with the thing at all. A very basic, incredible classic instrument. And of course, if you ever were a fan of Status Quo, it's the guitar that spawned, you know, a whole genre. And I think Francis Rossi sold one recently. It fetched something like 100,000 when he auctioned his old beat-up Telecaster. So there's a couple of examples. If you're looking for budget instruments, think about second-hand. Don't just think about buying them from the online sellers and, you know, the sort of social media markets. Think about brick and mortar, old school, physical stores, because some of those guys aren't doing a huge amount of business and they probably want the sales. And again, if something's been there for a long time, that's probably another key. If something's been there for a few weeks, these people don't make money if the inventory's not moving. So sometimes when something's been there for a long, long time, they'll let them go for seriously not a lot of money. But they're really good options. And again, nice guitar for 450 Canadian. I don't think you can go far wrong with that. Have fun. Take care, guys.